evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here in large numbers because we have a spectacular evening lined up. And perhaps one of my, we speak in superlatives of everybody who comes here, largely because they deserve those superlatives. But today, really, there are two very, very special people here. And certainly from the artistic world, my absolute favorite, and I think favorite of many people over here. So, but it's diminutive, it's reductive to call Atul Dodiya an artist because very frankly, he is not an artist. He is an ocean. Imagine yourself encountering really, what one could call liquid modernity. Anything and everything that constitutes the world coalesces in the mind, the heart, and the work of Atul Dodiya. So I really wouldn't call him an artist. For me, what he really epitomizes is that in a world where we are talking of shutdowns always, for me, Atul Dodiya embodies the idea of embrace. He really is what globalization could stand for. Humor, hybridity, irony, influences, bringing the world back to your home place and making it your own, showing up the contradictions, showing up the play. So it's just in terms of influences, it ranges from Chinese calligraphy and Mughal miniatures to the Italian masters, to the Indian progressives, to the really disruptive work of the Dada movement abroad, to Edward, from David Hockney to Edward Cooper to you just name it, I mean, I was telling Atul today that to look up his work is to have 20 gadgets in your hands, your ears, strapped to your foot, because every time you look at a piece of work, you really have to refer. It's such a rich conversation. His wife has a beautiful word for him. She says, we called it the Hydra head imagination, but I think she really sums him up better because she says that he's like an octopus imagination. Because really like an octopus, he wants to grab everything. He's got like 8 tentacles and he's bringing it all in. And then he coheres it into something wonderful for us to witness. And in that, it's not just the influences and the images, but that his sheer technical ability cuts across from canvas, oil, laminates, watercolors, charcoals, installations, the shutters that he's famous for, the metallic shutters. So it's really a prodigious mind. And as I said, that's not just to admire it from a distance, but to understand what that means for us in our society today. Because, ladies and gentlemen, from the first to the last, what Atul Dodiya embodies is openness. So please join me today in welcoming him on stage. Before we do that, and so just reserve your clap just for a bit, we'd like to show you literally a jhalak of his work, because even if you were to watch it for the next 3 hours, it would still be just a drop in the ocean of his imagination. But we just want to show you a bit of his work before we bring him on stage. So as I said, that was just a drop in the ocean. And I'd just like to say one more thing before we call him up, which was to say, I spoke of the sheer prodigious nature of his imagination, but the other thing that makes Atul so special is that he also represents the anxiety of the artist and a citizen in the world. And his work is really imbued with that. And always the protagonist of his work is India. You know, India in all its seasons, its sound, its influences, its religion, its politics, its pigments, its festivals, its weather, its seasons, and its people, you know. Always and always, Atul goes out into the world and brings it back into where he lives and where his heart lies, which is India. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Atul Dodiya.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Atul. So Atul, as I said, you know, we'll try and run through, your work is so vast that
Yeah.
I also want to bring out some of your life and your impulses and the autobiographical note, in addition to your imagination and your politics and all of that. So let's first just deep dive into, you know, Gandhi in all this kind of kaleidoscopic universe. The one still point has been your fascination and your relationship with Gandhi. So, and interestingly, because you're a very conceptual artist, you said that he was pretty much India's first conceptual artist. Why did you think of Gandhi like that? And why has he been your abiding passion when everyone else seems to have set him aside?
Well, I will have to go back a little bit
Yes.
and tell you the story that it is, in 1991, 92, for the first time, I went outside India.
Can everyone hear him at the back? Yes.
Okay, sorry. Um, I was a French government scholar and I went to Paris. First time I saw the original works of the masters. And that year was amazing. It opened up so many ideas and concepts and, you know, the way of living and looking at life and art in diverse way. And 92 October, I returned back to Bombay, and I was full of Matisse and Picasso and Van Gogh and Cezanne, all this thing, and I said, I will do this, I will do that, and within 2 months' time, on the 6th December, Babri Masjid was demolished. And what we saw, I mean, of course, to begin with, I was shocked because we saw live telecast on television that building is getting kind of destroyed. Not with machine, but people were actually.
Atul, just keep
So,
the mic to you.
Yeah, so, and then subsequent riots in the country, Bombay, we saw serial bomb blast, all that. And yeah, I was shocked, stunned. I mean, anybody would be. The conflict between the communities. But I was full of still, you know, artists and life of the artist, their work and all. 97, after 5 years, India was celebrating 50 years of independence. And we, artists were invited for various shows and participate. And we were all very happy that, you know, 50 years of independence is a wonderful thing. But at that time, I thought that, is it really a moment of celebration? Poverty, lack of education, no great leadership, you know, tension between the communities, and often politically motivated. So then I thought of Gandhi. Of course, originally my father, and I come from Saurashtra, Kathiawad. The Gandhi was from there. And I used to go, because my sister used to live in Porbandar, and we used to visit as a young, in vacation. And I would go to Kirti Mandir, the birthplace, which is a memorial museum of Gandhi. And at the age of 16, I had read Gandhi's autobiography, originally in Gujarati, which my mama, my uncle had gifted me. And the school I went was also Gujarati medium school in the suburb, northeastern suburb of Mumbai, Ghatkopar, which was very much a Gandhian in its approach, called Gurukul Vidyalaya. And So basically, this was the background, and I felt that, oh, Gandhi is everywhere. On a rupee note, every third road is called MG Road. Um, Stamps, government offices, wherever you go, his picture is there. But Gandhian philosophy of non-violence, love for fellow human beings, which is lacking. So it's something is going terribly wrong. And
Sure.
from here, the series of paintings started on Gandhi, which is still, you know,
But you called him a conceptual artist.
well, that was the reason for that, actually, because you see, the thing is that as a painter, a person who is interested in from, everything from pre-Renaissance to post-modern, I'm talking about the Western art, and all that I'm thinking about these masters, and to paint a person, a political leader, or a great social involved person, which is very difficult. It's totally different thing. If I can paint Picasso or image from Picasso's work, or I can do portrait of Van Gogh, or I can paint sunflower in my own way, but to do Gandhi and talk about the what he stood for, which was more social, political, which wouldn't gel with my artistic perception. So I said, I want to paint, but I am not sure how. I want to go near Gandhi and talk about it because it's a need of the time, but don't know how to deal with it. Then I came across a statement by Gandhi where he says, I am not a seer, rishi, or a philosopher of nonviolence. I'm an artist of nonviolence, and I try to develop the art of nonviolence in the realm of resistance. I said, if I see him as an artist, then I know very well what to do with an artist. And then I said, so then I realized that, Gandhi is with his, if you notice his clothing, the structure of his ashram, offices, Dandi March, lifting the pinch of salt, non-cooperation, these are all very conceptual ideas. And he was performing. And then, of course, in contemporary art, particularly in the West, so there are artists who have been doing, performances as an art form. It's not theater, it's not cinema, it's not, but just body, using body and all that. And I thought that Gandhi is probably the first conceptual artist. And that's how, you saw one of the images where, there is a kind of a coyote, a wild animal, and a man in
In a hood.
kind of covered with felt, which is a performance by one of the greatest conceptual artists called Joseph Beuys, German artist. And so that performance happened in '74 in New York. And I call that work Bapu at Rene Block Gallery, New York, 1974. That's why I called him conceptual artist. And
So
that's why Gandhi.
Yeah. So I'm going to move away. As I said, we want to
Sure.
understand your roots. But just to finish this Gandhian note that, one thinks of you as a very political artist. And in a strange way, like you said, 1992 pretty much triggered, your canvas and your mind. And you'd come back from Paris. You were feeling paralyzed by having looked at all the kind of work that the masters had done. And then in 2002, you came up with a really beautiful and very different kind of work, which was the Antler Anthology, again in response to the Gujarat Riots, And unlike, say, Taib Mehta or Picasso, whose response to violence was very different, yours was very redemptive. So can you share that with the audience? What was, a little bit about that work and what triggered in your head?
Well, cinema and literature, both were very much there for me from the very beginning. I used to read and write a little bit. Now I have been writing a little more. The Gujarati poem paintings, the Antler Anthology, came after a series called Broken Branches, which was a completely different, it was not painting, but there were cabinets, wooden cabinets installed in a room with prosthetic limbs, human bones, and it happened after the 2002 Gujarat riots. And I was invited for a show in Manchester, and the show was called New Indian Art, Home, Street, Bazaar, Shrine, Museum, a long title. But so for that I had done. And when I was doing that, the Gujarat, killings happened. And it just, so that series happened called Broken Branches with cabinets, which was for the first time I attempted something different than the actual painting. And after that, this Antler anthology came, and I felt that there were shutters and there were broken branches and many other things, and I felt that I'm fed up of this, the grim reality and what's happening around, and let me just go to pure art. And what is pure art? That's the poetry. So I said, okay, and I have been reading Gujarati poetry for a long time. Most of the contemporary poets are friends. So I said, I'm going to choose a text which has nothing to do with social political issue, just sheer creativity. And I thought, what if I paint? And of course, the reasons was also because I have been looking at Mughal and Persian miniatures, which has a text, our own Rajput and the other miniatures which had a again text over there. So I thought, what if the text is written, but not as a kind of abstraction, but if someone knows the language, he could read it. So are you reading it or seeing it? Or reading and seeing is happening simultaneously. So what is that experience? Actually, it's true. We read, but we actually see first, and then we read it, or it happens simultaneously. I was interested in this whole thing. I said, let me just do this, and I started doing large-scale watercolors. But I chose the medium, which was a charcoal, crushed in water with hand, and with little glue in it, and I wrote the text as it is. And so if someone knows Gujarati language, he could actually read the poem. And then there were layers of charcoal washes which were applied. And it so happened that when the works were finished, there were 12 large-scale poems, and it looked as if a poem is emerging out of ash. So again, the shadow of what is going on,
Yeah.
which probably fell there. But the intention was not to kind of do that.
So you're saying the magic came out of the process, actually.
Yes, absolutely.
So we're just going to move away. Atul, just for those of you who haven't seen that work, like Atul said, it's really poetry coming out of the ashes. And in a way, when you see it, you feel that he's almost reminding Gujarat and India and everybody that this is not what Gujarati language and Gujarati people were meant to be, because in the heart of that violence, he's reminding what else language can do, at that moment. So one really got that sense of hope, Atul, out of your work. So let's just cycle back to your childhood, Atul, that you were called Balwant Singh. Thank God somebody named you Atul Dodiya. How did that happen? And also, you grew up in a chawl with 7 siblings, extremely constrained space. This kind of grasp of the world, this hunger for the world, did it arise a little bit out of that kind of constricted nature of your childhood? That may be a psychoanalyst question, but have you ever contemplated that?
Well, God has given me everything. He deprived me with one thing, that is style.
Style.
Style. There's no style, and I kind of, that's because I think the way I grew up in a chawl in Ghatkopar, and half of the neighbors were Maharashtrian and half were Gujarati, again from Saurashtra mostly. So we spoke very fluent Marathi, and of course, and because majority of the Maharashtrians were from Pune, Brahmin, so I spoke the Shuddha Marathi. I speak, and they speak Kathiawadi Gujarati, not the Gujarati which is spoken in Surat or Baroda or in Ahmedabad, but the Gujarati which is in Rajkot or Junagadh or Porbandar, that kind of. Well, that's how I grew, and it just happened that at the
But there was no art over there. So how did this impulse for art?
Except for the Marathi family were listening radio in the morning and mostly the classical music. So I would hear at my friend's house about Bhimsen Joshi and Kumar Gandharva, Kishore Yamonkar, Prabha Atre. All this very young age I would listen to these musicians, but no visual art. Only the exposure was Ravi Verma. oleographs
Oleo-
and goddesses and the Bollywood Hindi cinema
But,
posters.
but Atul, you've said that pretty much at the age of 10, you had absolute conviction that you wanted to be an artist,
Yeah.
you know? So can you describe, I've read what triggered that, but I'd love you to share it with the audience, that what was that moment of epiphany in a classroom, apparently, where something so random, you know, Zakir Hussain was talking about how sometimes you're just destined for something. So the most random trigger can create that kind of conviction in a 10-year-old boy. And also that just at that moment when you decided that art was going to be your life, you almost lost your eyes. And you've lived with this, you know, tension between wanting to see the world and actually losing your eyesight. So can you talk about what that did for you?
Well, I was in sixth standard, and one of our drawing teachers had done a drawing of a boy kicking a football from side, from profile. And he had asked everyone to draw. And before that, there was nothing, no interest, not really much in fifth standard or before that. There was no interest in art or anything. But like as a student, I also did a copy of that particular drawing. And somehow I felt that I have achieved a likeness, I have achieved a proportion. It's almost exact the way my teacher has drawn. It may not have been exact, but I felt that. And after that, I was just kind of I just felt like drawing and painting all the time. It was just before the Diwali vacation, and we were playing Gilli Danda, you know, with her. And I got hurt, you know.
So while that's happening, let me regale you with all the things that Atul's wife, Anju, says about his work, because she, of course, also is a wonderful artist in her own right. But she says that Atul is the accelerator and she's the brake, you know, and that his imagination is really like Atlantic Pacific, and that any given moment, there's just so much going on in his brain that she very often has to kind of calm him down and settle him and tell him to focus. And the other interesting thing is that while we're talking of this kind of encyclopedic canvas, your studio is actually called Nain-Sukh, after the miniaturist, you know? So you really are a kind of a citadel of contradictions, Atul.
Right.
But now back to your story. So.
Okay, so, and then I got injured and, in my right eye, and I lost vision. I was taken to clinic and all that, and doctor said, you know, there is a, after a week we'll check, and they said it's due to injury, there is a cataract, and but you are young, we'll wait, and then the new surgery is coming with a lens was implant, and but I waited, it just went for 20 years, nothing happened. Then I decided to go for it. When I went for the operation, doctor said, okay, you have a retinal detachment, and your one eye has solid detachment. That's why, you know, it's very difficult to, I mean, of course, the operation was done, lens was implanted, I didn't get vision. And then he said, okay, oh, you know, you have this thing. So he checked the other eye. He said there are holes in the other retina as well. So for that, the cryosurgery will be done. So after the operation, 7 days, both the eyes were closed, and with bandage and all. And later on, I got some vision, which is, I don't know how to call it, 80%, 70%. It's difficult, but it's like a blur. If you see, you know, 2, 3, 4 sheet of tracing paper or a mosquito net and try to, or basically out of focus kind of a thing. And the vision doesn't synchronize. So I have a double vision. So it's a blank canvas, and if I draw a charcoal line, black vertical, I see the double thing. But in normal, this kind of, you know, with many things around, forget. And now this one eye, which is absolutely fine, it takes over.
So did that affect your, did it consciously affect your work? Did you live with that anxiety of losing vision?
No, I was scared, and I was fully fearful, absolutely. And I still feel, imagine, I mean, not to be able to see. That's something very scary. So I used to draw, you know, before all this happened. I mean, when I was hurt, and then blind man's drawings and all that. But when the retinal detachment happened, after that I stopped doing that. I was really scared that losing the eyesight, yeah.
So Atul, your original, you know, your influences, and you were growing up, you went to the JJ School of Art, but it was really the progressives, you know, Taib Mehta and
Yeah.
the others that were really affecting you, Akbar Padamsi and the rest. And then what has ended up being your abiding sort of influences or your conversation is with much more radical, artists like Marcel Duchamp or
Yeah,
Franz Picabia
yeah,
or, David Hockney,
yeah.
Edward Cooper, all of these. So, and those are actually very, in a way, removed from the Indian context. So can you talk about what happened to you when you went abroad and what was that rupture? How did you finally feel that, okay, this is how I'm going to express myself, away from really what was happening in India, actually?
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, of course, at the Jesus School of Art, and Bombay was really the center for art then, in terms of sale, particularly. So most of the artists from whether Calcutta, Delhi, Bangalore, anywhere, they would come and they would exhibit in Bombay. So we had a great opportunity to meet those artists, and then the fantastic artists like Akbar Padamsi, Tayyab Mehta, and these people were living in Bombay. And Hussain Saab was there in Bombay, but you never know where he is. He would come, he would vanish, and he was like that. So, but regularly I used to meet Akbar and Tayyab. Um, and what we studied at the art school, I was telling you that my biggest regret in India is this, as a student of art, is that we don't have great museums. We study, we talk about oil painting. The oil painting, the great oil painting is done in the West, in Europe. Rembrandt, Cézanne, you name it, Courbet, French masters and Dutch master and Flemish master, all these things. That we study, we learn. But we don't see the original work at all. Where to see? If you want to see Van Gogh, where you go and see? So the students, we were just kind of, we were craving. And we would just kind of imagine that, okay, because the reproduction, in those days, reproduction quality were also not so good. Books were not coming. JJ Library would have only the early masters, and we would not get the contemporary art. So there was always a tremendous amount of, eagerness, craving to see the great masters. And actually, through seeing, you learn, actually, um, then much later, and I never applied, but then I was invited by the French government and as a scholar, so I went to Paris, and there I saw from postmodern to from Renaissance to postmodern contemporary art, everything, and I was completely baffled, stunned, and confused. I thought, my goodness, I call myself a figurative painter, and within the figurative genre, such profound work has happened that I lost faith in myself. I thought I would stop painting. Not possible, because whatever you do, imagine Picasso comes in front of you. I was living in Mare, just 5 minutes away from Picasso Museum, and just seeing just Picasso, I was afraid of his, his courage. I was scared of his courage. Okay, my God, someone could do. He was such a genius, and every time he would do some things differently. And apart from old masters and all these things. So it took me 3 years to come to terms with what I should be doing once I returned back to Bombay. And then, as I was telling, that many other things were happening in the country. So, but I realized that, okay, I come from certain background. I live in a certain kind of society. Something could come from there. I did not have to think in terms of only Europe or America. So then, gradually, I did one of the first paintings after that was Letter from a Father, the first image which we showed on the screen.
So, in fact, Atul, that's a good place to start about, how you finally recovered your voice from the shock of seeing that what had already gone before you was with Letter from My Father. Will you describe that painting to people? And then, then I want us to start talking about pop culture and Bollywood and, religion and how you've engaged with all of that as well. But just this hybrid imagination, this breaking away from the progressives and what both West and India was doing to arrive at the Atul voice. Yeah, first of all, you don't have one voice, but at least describe that particular canvas. How did that come together?
Yeah, no, in those days, I'm talking about 91, 92, the email was not there, and my father would write me many letters. And I would write to him saying how I am. And his Gujarati was the font was old Gujarati, the way they used to write in 30s and 40s. There is a slight difference in the way people write as time changes. So he wrote me many letters. And when I was in this dilemma and this confusion about what I should be painting, how I should be painting, I said, what if I um, do a portrait of my father? Because he's dear to me and I know him. He has a certain personality with mustache. And so I started doing his painting. But one of the things in art school, we were taught that the a portrait should be like this, this size, not bigger than your palm. That's the academic approach. And I said, what if I just enlarge it? So first thing which I did, I broke from my normal realism was, I painted much bigger, which looked like a film hoarding or a poster. I said, no, this is not correct because after all, it's my father. There is a different kind of relationship. So I would come to studio, but I would not look at the easel and the painting, do other things and all. And then finally, then I said, okay, is it sufficient? Then I realized that he wrote me many letters. So what if I have a text on it? Then I felt, well, this is almost like it's a cinematic. It happened in cinema that someone is reading a paper, a letter, and the face emerges, in the thing that we have seen in film. But so I said, oh, so this cinematic device, if I use it in painting, how to do it? So I just kind of said, well, write. Then I asked my father, why don't you write a 1.5-inch big letter on this thing to fit the letter on a 4 feet by 6 feet canvas. He tried, but he said, well, I can write normal thing, but 1.5 inch is very difficult. So I took a photograph of his letter and I projected. While projecting, I was writing and I saw my own shadow because the projection was the back. So I told my brother that why don't you just do a contour of myself as well. And so there was my shadow, my father, the letter is there. While doing this, and the text of that letter was just simple, that you are returning. That was the last letter before I was coming back to India. And, there is a lot of rain in Bombay, and, Ganpati is happening, and Chembur Ganpati decoration is more than 1 crore rupees. And that normal, how a father would write a letter to a son. It was just general thing about the family, neighborhood, etc. So when I was writing that thing, during that time, one news I read in a paper, it was about that particular year, Siberian cranes, there was a photograph, they didn't come to Bharatpur. They used to come every year for thousands of years or whatever. And experts were worried. I was away, I was returning home, and this, migrating birds. I said, what if I add this on the upper part of the canvas? Totally different. I said, this story or this, from where it has emerged, it's only I know. I said, but I paint for myself. So I should do it. Later on, we'll see how people see, what people feel. That's a very much later thing. So I just did that. So the text of my father's letter, my own shadow, the migratory birds, Siberian cranes came, and that's how finally the painting was complete. And I felt I did something different in that work.
So, Atul.
But one thing, which I must tell you, that now if often people say, but if you tell us this story, then we understand, but what if we don't know this story, how we are supposed to see the painting? That's one of the questions I often come across by, general viewer. But viewer is supposed to interpret in their own way. They don't have to follow at all an artist's instruction or the reason why the artist painted. I painted for my own reason. But, you must see, because say, if I say red color, for someone it's a horrifying thing, experience, or someone might say it's festive. Black could be, dark and grim. Some might say it's night. Some might say soothing, it's meditative. So we have our own, personal approaches towards the visual world. And that's how it should be approached.
When you started doing your really disruptive work, did the artistic community around you, Was there tension because you were friends with a lot of people? Did their opinion matter? Did you have anxiety? And then I want to come to asking you why you liked the artists that you keep talking about. So same way as we are trying to understand you, convey to us why these artists worked for you.
Well, one thing happened that because I left for Paris, I had my first solo show, and the works were very photorealistic work. Everybody liked it. My first solo was success in terms of sale, and it critical acclaimed. Everybody liked it, and then immediately I left for Paris. When I returned, this change happened. You saw one painting with a myself holding gun, revolver. It was one of the first images. So that was after that, after letter from father, all that. So some people felt that Paris has ruined him. I mean, he got a bad influence from the West. He was so good, wonderful, nice, simple, landscapes, still life, and family pictures, and they were they were good paintings. I mean, I'm happy with those works, nothing like that. But there was a tremendous need to do something different in a different way. So I said, no, I'm not going to listen to anyone now, because I got my solid dose from Picasso, and every day he talks to me and he tells me, go. If I'm confused, if I should I do it or not.
You asked Picasso.
I asked, and he said, yeah, you should allow, do it.
So, we'll come back to these other influences,
Yeah.
the second question I asked you. But before that, Atul, this is something that everyone in the audience will vibe with, is your passion for Bollywood, How have you brought...
My passion for?
For Hindi cinema and
Hindi
Bollywood and
cinema,
pop
oh,
culture,
okay.
So, like I said, going from the classics to miniaturists to all of this, what about pop culture and kitsch excited you so much,
Well, living in Bombay, you can't escape. That's one thing.
But you can reject. You didn't want to reject.
No, I didn't want. I tell you why. The reason is, as I said, I was saying that Ravi Verma, oleographs, my mother is extremely religious person. She was. And so goddesses were there. So that was first thing. Like we all siblings would sleep on the ground, and goddesses as if looking at us. And we would, so that's the first painted image. Parallelly, I mean, I remember the Hindi film posters used to be painted with hand painted in those days, and now it's all digital. But heroines' cheek or face would be very soft and all. I remember there was a film called Kache Dhage. Vinod Khanna and Kabir Bedi were the actors, and they were dacoit. So and those huge scale faces were painted with palette knife. So very rugged and rough surface one sees, and light, violet light and orange light, or a pink light, and green lights coming from the sides. So something, I think we don't need this. It distracts, no? It distracts me actually. My own work.
I thought you had this kind of Atlantic Pacific imagination, Atul.
Well,
You subject us to this, and then you want to be solitary while you talk.
Yeah. No, so that I remember those things. I used to see. Then there was one studio in Dadar where I used to go and watch them painting. So that was there. But more than that, my mother was and father both. My father would talk mainly about singers and actors like K.L. Saigal and Pankaj Malik. My mother would talk about Dilip Kumar, Raj Kapoor, and Devanand, and listen a lot Talat Mahmood and all that. So cinema, that Hindi film was very much there at home, and then Doordarshan came, so we would kind of watch movies at home also, but we would be taken to films and I would see. But as I said, in the beginning, when I decided to be a painter, soon I felt that I enjoy cinema, and I probably whether to become filmmaker.
But Atul, I mean, everyone loves cinema. It's just that it's very unusual in your work that everything that you love, you pull into the canvas, So that's what I was asking,
Yeah.
that it's not just that it was in your atmosphere, one
Yeah,
would
yeah.
know. But what was it about you that wanted to bring cinematic images, posters, was it conscious, or it's like
No,
a
no,
little bit like what you were describing, this canvas, that it's almost by happenstance,
Yeah.
a shadow falls, you suddenly hear about a crane. Is it that
Yeah.
unconscious, or was there any thinking behind
Yeah,
that?
no, because I think one thing I realized in certain span of time that uh, I like everything. You see, I don't say that, oh, this is kitsch and it's bad taste. Nothing like bad taste. And I mean, there are places to everything, and it works in its context. So there is a love-hate relationship with Bollywood, that you hate things and you like it
Then you
also.
can't do without it.
You can't do without it also. Uh, it gets overlapped and all that. And I think probably the kind of work I was doing with a lot of reference to European masters or otherwise, there were works which were about for Gandhi or other stuff, poem painting and all. Here it's completely, it would kind of give a different thing. You saw some of I did a series called Saptapadi, Scenes from Marriage Regardless. It was about joy and sorrow of married life with enamel paint on laminates and all. And so I think there, I myself, I found another different kind of me. That, oh, okay, this pink and crimson and turquoise and all, that I could use in a different, certain way if and it would certainly definitely give a different kind of narrative altogether. So,
Okay.
yeah.
So, yeah, just let's open this up to the audience. We didn't manage to cover much ground at all. But just while I'm quickly reading the questions, the other thing in your work is always religion, Atul. And you have great anxiety about, you've talked about 92 and then 2002, the kind of destructive aspect of religion. But at the same time, your work has a lot of religious metaphors, it has a lot of religious iconography. And your new work, you said that if there's something you wanted to do and you've never done, would be to paint Ramakrishna Paramhansa, So can you talk about this kind of divided feeling you have about religion as well?
For this subject, I need a sip. Well, no, I mean, as I said about Gandhi, how it came, and you saw one of the shutter called, it was goddess Mahalakshmi. And yeah, I was very disturbed when I um, read in 88 actually, 86, 80, 88, three sisters, Sahu sisters from Kanpur, a school teacher's daughters, hanged themselves because the father could not afford dowry. And when a girl child is born in a Hindu family, we say Lakshmi is born. Goddess of prosperity, goddess of, or she will bring prosperity, joy, happiness, wealth. So, what a contradiction. And I felt it's an extremely hypocrite society. Uh, so, I was already doing shutters. And shutter is like you have to experience inside image, outside image. It's not just you visually see with your eyes, but I invite viewer to throw it up, pull it down. You use your muscles to experience a work of art. There is a sound when the shutter hits the hood up on the upper level. So, and when you open it, you have this very bleak portrait of three sisters, and almost like a headline, newspaper headline kind of a work, very illustrative, very direct. But I felt a need to do that. So sometimes I have used, same with the Saraswati, when you open it, there is an abstract black form, which is a map of Qatar, where Hussein Saab finally decided to settle, but soon he passed away. But so sometimes I use the God, goddesses in a certain way when I feel that it's how the religion is misunderstood or been misinterpreted by few who decide as if they know religion.
So, in fact, Omar Shah wants to ask you that, you've grown up with so much violence and that affected your work. What is your opinion of what's happening in the country where lynchings now are the new normal? And considering the fact that you were affected by violence, how do you feel now? And is your work responding to this current setting in any way?
Well, of course, I mean, Tayyab Mehta, he never said himself, but what I learned from him, or what I felt, that even talking loudly is a form of violence. And so, if someone is so sensitive about this kind of thing, which I saw in Tayyab's case actually, and I feel that it is disturbing, no doubt, and it is it bothers. Every day we read, I'm scared to open the newspaper when you hear all these things. Someone is eating meat or beef. It's nobody's business. But going in a house of someone, pull him out, kill him, all this thing, it's barbaric, terrible, and I can't believe it's happening today. So then, as an artist, what I do? I am not a politician or a social reformer. I don't go join a morcha. I don't go to public. Then what an artist is supposed to do? My concern and my priority is creativity. So then how to how I have to resolve things for myself when I see this. And as someone who is 24 hours just thinking about the creative, areas. So then I think it comes. Even while writing poetry, some different kind of shadows come, whether you decide it was planned or not planned. It happens. So it's there.
Okay, let's just stop at that. There's just one question. Yadav Mehra wants to say that how can an aam aadmi or aam aurat go about developing taste in art?
Aam aadmi or aam aurat should develop a taste in art just by seeing. One has to see a lot. You see, I am an artist not because I draw well. I am an artist because I see well. You see, someone is a singer. Singer is not because someone has a good voice. Singer because she or he has a ear for the sound. So I think that is first thing. Seeing, what has happened, unfortunately, in our country, that lot of very few elite, if you come to Bombay, Bombay is such a big city. It's only few South Bombay galleries are in South Bombay, and some people, those who acquire work, collect works of art or something, they come, that's it. I mean, we are not attempting to invite much bigger, larger, people. And I think somehow they go to ancient collection. I mean, the museums, which has a antiquity or the ancient art, as if one is supposed to go to museum. So they go there. But as far as the contemporary art is concerned, immediately people say, we don't understand this. We don't understand modern art. Because there is no repo or there is no thing. Like in the West, you go to the museums in MoMA or Met or Pompidou or wherever. I mean, very children are sitting in front of difficult work like Jackson Pollock or Mondrian or Picasso, and there is someone who is explaining to various level of audience or viewer. So I think that is not happening. I think it's basically one has to do an effort and just see. And now with the internet, you can even watch interviews of artists and stuff like that.
So just one last note, Atul, to end on that. Out of all of this, if we were to get really one insight into you of all the influences, all the passions, all the themes that you've had from Bombay, India, everything, which would you pick as being, your most intense, passionate influence in your life?
One particular influence.
I'm trying to be your wife here now,
Very difficult, actually. Too many things. No, cinema is there, literature is there, great poets, filmmakers, and artists. Uh, Sometimes I tell myself, some people whom you have, I wish I would have met. Who are these people? Um, Rabindranath, Gandhi, Satyajit Ray. Yeah, I wish I would have met them, And Tagore and Gandhi, of course, before I was born, they were not there, but Ray was there, of course, but never met him. So these are the people who matters to me in a big way.
Thank you very, very much, Atul. I think
Pleasure.
at least when we are asking ourselves that question, we can look back and say, we met Atul Dodiya while he was still around.
Well.
So thank you for coming very, very much, Atul.